everybody, and welcome to another edition of Poland Daily Travel. You are looking good. With me in the studio is the sartorially resplendent, the inimitable, the James Bond-like figure known as Nicholas, no relation, Richardson.
Thank you for having me again, Will.
Have you told your parents that we're not related?
Well, I think my parents have a pretty good idea. I think
They do?
Well,
Okay.
Before she died, my mother certainly knew how many children she'd had.
She did.
Yeah, and you weren't.
Do you
one
have
of
a
them.
written statement?
No, I don't think we need a written statement. No.
No, because sometimes people say that you and I are related, and I'm, a little concerned.
Keen to scotch that rumour.
I'm a little scotch that rumor. Yes, I am. I'm very keen to scotch that rumor. In the last episode, we were talking about reiterating, because we've done this before, the major attractions in Poland, the places that draw the most visitors from abroad, people who are not living in this country. All right, and we decided that three places, that was Warsaw and Krakow, not necessarily in that order, and we also threw in Gniezno being the first capital. So Gniezno and Krakow and Warsaw, in that order, were the first capitals of Poland, and great places to start.
Of course.
Boy, your knowledge of this country, you can get a very good introduction just by walking through those cities.
Yeah, particularly Warsaw.
Yeah. Warsaw gives you the full flavor of contemporary capital, with soon the tallest skyscraper in Europe.
In Europe, yeah.
And apart from Moscow. Is Moscow in Europe? I don't know.
I think we've always considered Moscow is in Europe.
It is. It's the other side of the Urals that is where Asia starts.
Well,
right?
in theory, yes, although some people would say that Europe and Asia is really one continent anyway, but that's a geological argument we don't have to have on your travel show.
Great, Scott.
Yeah, I know.
I need to read up.
You're
leaving me behind.
This is just common knowledge. Any intelligent person would know this.
What would you reckon is the #1 tourist destination?
Well, I think I know the answer to this question, and I think it is genuinely a surprising answer. Auschwitz concentration camp.
Auschwitz-Birkenau, the concentration complex.
Which is just an amazing...
It's #1.
Which is just, when you think about it, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Or slightly horrific, actually.
Have you been there?
I haven't been there. I mean, I should visit because I think it's an interesting historical site. And I have just read a book, The Volunteer, by Jack Fairbrother, which tells the story, an incredible story, of Witold Pilecki, who was a Polish army officer who volunteered and was deliberately allowed himself to be captured and sent to Auschwitz, where he spent just over 2 years learning about how it was operating, setting up sort of intelligence gatherers within the camp, a form of camp resistance even, and getting information out to the outside world as to what was actually going on. And then he himself escaped to continue his work. He then fought in the Warsaw Uprising. But the idea that anybody would volunteer to go to a concentration camp is, for us, it's almost incredible. But I haven't visited Auschwitz, and I suppose I should, having read the book. But I've always felt something slightly uneasy about visiting a concentration camp. As what I would be, obviously, even though I enjoy history, I'd still be effectively a tourist. I'd still be going to sort of gaze at something. And it's such the whole infrastructure and the whole idea behind the concentration camps as they became, and this sort of setting out to, essentially, by the Nazis to exterminate people whom they thought were surplus to requirements. I mean, it's as blunt as that. This first industrial killing of other human beings. This evil, it's sort of hard to feel comfortable going to visit a place like that, I think.
Yes.
I mean, and sometimes you see photographs on the internet of of tourists misbehaving, taking selfies in front of the execution wall and all this sort of thing. You think, well, this is the problem. This is something you have to be very sober. I mean, I think the problem is
serious about.
You can go to a graveyard and visit your relatives' graves, but graveyards are normally nicely kept up and they're quiet, and that's sort of, you're paying respect.
Right.
And I think at a concentration camp, and obviously there's Dachau outside Munich, which the Germans themselves sort of restored after the war in terms of...
It's interesting you should mention Dachau, because that's the first concentration. That is one of the first things I went to. I went there as a student, traveling around Europe. It wasn't my first destination, but in Germany, I specifically went there One, because Munich is a very beautiful city.
A lovely city.
But then it had this sort of festering wound on the outskirts, and I wanted to understand, try to understand.
I mean, I think the whole question of concentration camps is it's not as simplistic as we think. I mean, a lot of the camps fulfill different purposes. Dachau, I think, started just a place where they locked up the opposition as sort of a glorified prison. Auschwitz started life as a work camp. And then as the Nazis developed, developed sounds a rather innocent word, but as the Nazis developed their sort of theory and found that executing people, I mean, execution is the wrong word because this was murder. Execution implies some judicial process, and this was just murder, an extermination. And they found that even their own soldiers, even though they were the SS, which were made up of people in need of psychiatric assistance to start with, but even the reason they developed the concentration camps as they later did was because it was impossible to kill people in the numbers they wanted to kill them, because their own soldiers were finding it very traumatic, as you would do if you're going just shooting people for no reason, and they were. So that's why they developed, the weird minds they must have had, developed this whole idea of the gassing and the cremation and all these sort of things. But some camps, but there were, I mean, some of the camps in Poland which no longer exist, like Treblinka, like Belzec.
There's nothing to see there.
No, because but those camps existed solely for the purpose of killing people. You arrived on the train, and within a couple of hours, you were a pile of ash. Whereas Auschwitz and these other camps, they had later they had an execution, an extermination element, but they were also housing workers. And Auschwitz II, Birkenau, of course, and then the Auschwitz III, which was workers for the IG Farben factory, the chemical factory, not so far away. So the whole question of when we say concentration camp, we have to be very aware that we're talking about different things. But still, I get back to my original point, I think, which is the point of your question, is do you feel comfortable as a tourist visiting somewhere like that? And I've not been so far after all my years in Poland, because it's so evil, it's hard to contemplate you would actually willingly go and visit something which was so evil.
A very good place to end this segment. Thank you, Nicholas.
My pleasure.
For absolutely amazing commentary on the subject. Let's continue that in the next episode.
It's a fascinating subject.
We'll try to answer that question, because you haven't been to the concentration camps, and I've been to two, which you have very carefully explained the differences in them. And we're still going to have to resolve the question, is this a tourism site? How does it actually fit in? Or is it more of a religious, should it be more of a religious experience in the sense of,
exactly,
it's like, not celebrating, but honoring, commemorating a massive funeral, or as you say, a mass, an unimaginable amount of killing with some sort of memorializing. Exactly, yes. And I think that we have to come to terms with that.
There's a lot to say on this subject.
I don't think we quite have. Okay, there's plenty to talk about. We've never talked about this subject before. It's one that has to be addressed. We're
in Poland, we're talking about tourism, and this is a site which
I find it very difficult to talk about.
Remarkably, is the #1, in terms of people who visit, the #1 tourist site in Poland, which is extraordinary.
Thank you, Nicholas.
My pleasure.
We'll be back tomorrow night with more, talking about concentration camps, tourism, travel, some sort of memorializing. We'll keep talking and see if we can come up with some kind of answer. Okay? Stay tuned. Poland Daily Travel. See you tomorrow night. You're looking good.